Insurance is always a tricky thing. So sometimes it depends on what plan you have and what company you're working with. So take this information as, general guidelines.
So speech therapy and insurance have a long, twisted relationship, unfortunately. The good news is that as you continue to ask questions and advocate for your child through your insurance company, often you'll find that the very first answer you get is not the final answer. And so I would encourage every family to engage repeatedly in discussions of coverage with their insurance company to make sure that they're reaching the final answer that is the best answer they can get.
Your SLP or their biller at the clinic where they work may verify your insurance benefits on your behalf. They may not. It depends on their policy. Either way, it is always beneficial for you to know your insurance benefits and what your responsibility will be.
The first thing you'd want to do is make a call to your insurance and look into what your plan entails and covers. Speech therapy, especially for children, involves a variety of plan types and plan limits. There are things like limits on what types of diagnoses might be covered. There are things like limitations on the number of sessions you could get in a year, where you might get your sessions. Can they cover someone who's in your network? Will they cover someone who's out of your network? So there's all sorts of questions you'll want to ask your insurance, and you want to make a call to them at least one time to investigate those questions. And you probably want to come to that call prepared with a list of all the things you're going to ask, which it sounds like Apraxia Kids might be able to provide for you pretty soon.
After your initial consult with your SLP, you can ask for a procedure code, which is called a CPT code, a diagnosis code that they'll use for billing. Those are called ICD-10 codes. You'll want to ask for that information from your SLP, and hopefully they'll give it to you. You will then want to provide your insurance company with that information when you call to verify your benefit for speech therapy. You should also be sure to ask your SLP if they're in network or out of network with your insurance plan. That's really important to know. When you call your insurance company, the representative will cover your benefit details on the phone with you, and will cover things like if you have a deductible, co-payment, co-insurance. A co-insurance is like a co-pay, but it's a percentage of the cost instead of a fixed amount. They'll cover your visit limit if you have one, and possibly other details. You can also ask if your plan has any exclusions, such as they won't pay in the case of certain diagnoses. You will want to be sure to record detailed notes of your benefit details that were quoted to you, the representative's name, date and time of the call, and ask for a call reference number. This is very important in case there is a discrepancy in the future.
And then follow through with that list and any follow-up questions. And probably it would be a good idea also to be in touch with your provider, who may or may not help you with making that call, but be back and forth with them about any questions that are specific to their office and their practice that you may need to ask the insurance when you call.
Also keep in mind that insurance plans change and benefits can change from year to year. You will want to know if your plan follows a calendar year or a contract year. A contract year may look like July 1st to June 30th, something like that. Always alert your SLP in advance if your plan will be changing.
Insurance is a little bit arbitrary sometimes in terms of how many speech therapy sessions they will cover under a given plan and for a given diagnosis. I've heard all sorts of numbers for this. Sometimes they'll cover unlimited amounts of sessions, which is awesome. Sometimes they're covering about 60 sessions, which sounds pretty awesome, but if you need more than one session a week, that's not so great. Sometimes they're covering unlimited sessions, but only within the 60 days after you receive your evaluation, which seems kind of crazy for children with CAS.
Insurance is always a tricky thing. So sometimes it depends on what plan you have and what company you're working with. So take this information as, general guidelines. But I feel like giving as much medical and research-based information is important. So giving the testing numbers and the reason that you're giving that differential diagnosis, because sometimes the person doing the peer review, still doesn't really understand CAS. So really being able to cite the research.
And it would help for you to come prepared with all of the research, the great research we know about how much therapy children with CAS need and what's going to be beneficial for them to get their best outcomes.
Skinder Meredith in 2001 cited that more frequent, less amount of time. So if you had 2 hours of therapy in a week, 4:30s versus 2 1 hours would be more beneficial. I like to refer back to the ASHA technical report on CAS, which is, the speech pathology governing body.
So how do you extend your coverage? I would again say that the first answer you get from your insurance is probably not the final answer, or it might not be. So when you have to advocate for more sessions through your insurance, at minimum, you're probably going to need some kind of an official letter from a provider and maybe even a medical doctor as well.
If you have an insurance plan that SLPs in your area are not taking, because that happens a lot, you can also look for the gap exception to get better coverage. And so that gap exception means that you would contact your insurance company. You would say, I'm looking for the gap exception so that way I can get services with this specific clinic. The CPT code is 92507. That means speech language therapy. The ICD-10 code is R48.2, which means childhood apraxia of speech. And then you would say, that you're asking for this because there's nobody in your area that is able to perform the services for your insurance. And you might get more services in that way as well, covered by your insurance company through what's called the gap exception.
And I would say appeal. As long as you are still able to make a call to your insurance company, make use of that call and go up the chain. And hopefully you'll be able to advocate your way to a little bit more coverage and extension of some sort under your plan.
It is incredibly important to document all correspondence with your insurance company and record detailed notes of what you are told, the representative's name, date, and time of the call. And again, ask for a call reference number. Sometimes insurance representatives do not offer a call reference number unless you ask for it. A call reference number is a way for the insurance company to refer back to previous calls and what details were discussed. It is also a way for you to prove what was communicated to you by the insurance representative. This information is important if there is ever a discrepancy and you need that information to back up your appeal. You will want to include this information in your appeal.
So if you receive a denial for speech therapy coverage, I think the first question to answer would be, why was the therapy denied? Hopefully, along with that denial, you're going to be receiving some kind of documentation. And that's something you want to read very carefully to see exactly what is the reason that the insurance company has refused to pay. If you've already received your therapy and paid for it, which is often the case, that's a time when you need to figure out what's my next step in terms of advocating for this to get reversed. Sometimes it's a pretty simple fix, like they're missing a piece of documentation or what you submitted didn't quite have all the information they needed. Maybe they want some notes from your therapist.
If there are no mistakes, again, research the reason why speech therapy denied, because this will drive your next steps. Speech therapy may be denied because the service is not medically necessary. Your plan does not cover certain diagnoses. You have exhausted your visit limit, such as 20, 30, 60 visits per year. Or the claim was mishandled by the insurance company, and that happens as well.
And sometimes it's a bigger fix, like they've decided that childhood apraxia of speech for some reason or another isn't going to be covered under your existing insurance plan. At that point, that's when you want to go get your research and your documentation for why this service is medically necessary for your child at this moment.
I also really like to look at how progress is conveyed. Some of our kids with CAS make very slow progress. And one thing that insurance likes to see is that progress is still being made. So I think it's really important that you are showing how much progress is being made every single year. So for my children with CAS, maybe giving an articulation assessment is still going to show that they're in the less than 0.1 percentile. But if I can say that the percentage of consonants and the percentage of vowels that were correct was X percentage, and this year we've gone up 7% in our accuracy. Well, look, even though everything is coming out with the same numbers, we actually are making a difference. Insurance denials for CAS frequently, not always, can be remedied by citing research. Sometimes I will go ahead and get a note from the neurologist as well, even though CAS is a speech sound diagnosis. We're talking about medical coverage, so something from a doctor recommending X number of sessions a week can be beneficial.
You will then want to communicate with your speech therapist to see what their process is to solve these types of issues.
You can always dispute the denial and ask for a peer-to-peer review. One thing that's nice about that is your speech pathologist can speak to another medical professional about it. The con is that sometimes it's a nurse that deals with like adults and knows nothing about, pediatric speech sound disorders. So your SLP has got to be ready to give a lot of education for that nurse or the peer-to-peer reviewer.
If peer-to-peer review is not an option, and sometimes it's not, you always have the right to appeal a decision if you do not agree with your insurance company. You will want to contact your insurance company to find out what their appeal process is. Every insurance company has a different process for appeal. If a level 1 appeal is denied, you may be able to submit a level 2 appeal. You will then want to communicate with your SLP about that appeal. Your SLP may be able to assist you with this process.
In California, I have a handful of patients that have come to me through the California Insurance Review Board, in which case families have then made a complaint to the state about not getting the services that they're supposed to get. Now, I haven't been a part of that process, so I don't know exactly what that process is, but I do know that a handful of my patients have ended up with me because I have gotten phone calls from the state asking if we could give services to their patient.
If you have insurance through your employer, reach out to your human resources department and ask them to assist you with insurance problems and your appeal.
Again, anytime you receive an answer from your insurance, don't consider it the final answer until you've gone through some kind of advocacy or back and forth process. I found that for, at least in my individual experience, the families that return to their insurance, ask more questions, provide more documentation, and continue to push often have more successful outcomes with their ultimate coverage. Unfortunately, there are still a great many of our kids out there with CAS and many other kinds of speech and communication challenges whose speech therapy services are not covered. This is a huge problem in our country, and there's many ways you can advocate for this at many different levels of the insurance process. So you can advocate personally, directly with your insurance plan and with the representatives of the plan to push for your child's coverage. That could be as simple as a phone call and providing some documentation to your insurance company in answer to a denial letter.
You can always advocate for coverage with insurance through a good report that shows the differential diagnosis, citing research regarding frequency and the need for speech therapy, citing the ASHA technical report about CAS and the need for speech therapy, and gaining like a letter from a neurologist or a developmental pediatrician as well, supporting the need for speech therapy. Sometimes kids will be given a denial because of medical necessity, and so using a doctor's push for the therapy as well will help you get services. If there's not somebody in your area that takes your insurance, you can reach out to your insurance company for the gap exception, and which case they can treat somebody who is out of network as an in-network provider. The catch with that is they'll say sometimes it has to be within 30 miles. Well, 30 miles in the San Francisco Bay Area can mean a lot of traffic. I imagine also like New York or LA, Dallas. And so I've actually gotten on the phone as the provider and talked to somebody in a peer-to-peer review saying, okay, but I want you just to like map this out. It takes an hour and 20 minutes for those 30 miles. And then we actually got the gap exception after having a talk about the time that it would take to actually get there.
You can also advocate at the level of your employer. If your employer or your spouse's employer is the person providing your coverage, they have some say over what's included in that plan and how it's provided to their employees. And so you could go to the person who's responsible for that insurance contract right at your employer and ask them to advocate for some coverage for this specific diagnosis so that your child can get the services that they need. And then we could go up higher levels to maybe state or national advocacy, right? There's ways to partner with associations like Apraxia Kids or your state speech language and hearing association or the American Speech Language Hearing Association to advocate for certain diagnoses to be given more comprehensive coverage. And so that's another option as well.
Insurance is something that a lot of our families have to deal with, and it is so difficult to know where to start and what to do if you're denied coverage. Thank you so much to our wonderful Apraxia Kid Bootcamp graduate SLPs for giving specific tips about how to handle some of these issues. If you'd like to read more information about insurance, scan this QR code to read a few articles that give tips for dealing with insurance companies and funding resources. The unfortunate truth is that insurance plans can vary widely. We recommend that you post in your state or local Facebook support group to see if other parents or professionals in your area have had success with your specific insurance company. You can find a full list of our Apraxia Kids Facebook support groups in the Community tab on our website. If you are in need of therapy while you are still waiting for coverage from your insurance company, scan this QR code to use our state resource guides for help with insurance in your specific state. There is also a list of university speech and hearing clinics in each state that offer speech therapy at a much reduced rate. While you're searching the state resource guides, if you do know of a resource that is not listed for your community, please fill out the resource form and send us the information. This is the last of our You Asked, We Answered video series. We hope that you have found useful information and resources through these videos. Scan this QR code to see all of these videos, book recordings, and walk talks from Apraxia Awareness Month on our YouTube channel. We'd like to give a big thank you to our Apraxia Kids Bootcamp graduate SLPs for sharing their expertise for us in this series. We encourage you to find out more about each SLP by watching their video on the YouTube playlist. The apraxia journey can sometimes be a difficult one, but no matter where you are on that journey, know that you are not alone. You have Apraxia Kids in your corner, and that includes all of our staff, our board of directors and professional advisory council, our diversity and inclusion task force, and countless dedicated volunteers around the country. These SLPs that you've gotten to hear from in this video series, and hundreds more great SLPs in our community, and a huge online support network with thousands of members from around the world. We are all here to support you, encourage you, and empower you and your Apraxia star on this journey. We want nothing more than to give hope to families on the apraxia journey and that they continue to find hope in this amazing apraxia community.